Welcome back to the deep dive. Before we jump in and jump might not even be the right word today. Maybe descend is better. Could you do me a huge favor? Hit that like button. Make sure you're subscribed. It really, it helps us keep these deep dives coming, especially on these heavier topics.
And today is definitely one of those. We're looking at a text that makes some extremely bold claims.
To put it mildly, yeah. We are unpacking an ebook called Up Feminazis, Satanic Inversion Turning Women Against Motherhood, Man, and God. It's by an author named Conrad Riker.
Is a title.
It is a title. And I have to admit, when I first saw it, I thought, okay, this is going to be a very specific kind of political rant. But when you actually get into it, Riker is trying to do something much, much bigger than just complain about politics.
That's right. You really have to look past the inflammatory title to see the argument he's building. He's not just critiquing a policy or a party. He's arguing that Western institutions, they haven't just shifted left. They've undergone what he calls a biological hijack.
A biological hijack.
Yeah.
It's a complete reframing. And I think we should be clear up front about who Riker sees as his audience. He explicitly calls this a survival manual.
A survival manual, right.
He says this is for the man who feels problematic just for speaking his mind. Or, the guy who feels like he's being slowly erased by the culture.
Just the walking wounded, as he puts it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And look, we can only cover so much here. So if any of this resonates with you, you're going to want the full, unfiltered text. The ebook is available right now, Amazon Kindle, Google Play Books. But for now, let's get into the big theory. He calls it gynocracy.
Right. Gynocracy. And, usually when people hear that word, they think it just means, women are in charge now. But Riker's definition is different. He's arguing we've shifted from a patriarchy, which he defines as a system based on, say, logic and order, to a system ruled by what he calls female emotionalism.
So it's not about who's the CEO, it's about the operating system of the whole society.
Precisely, the whole operating system. He says the tools of control have changed. It's not direct authority anymore, it's consensus, it's emotional comfort, it's safety. And he traces this back to a fusion of feminism and Marxism.
We will get to that fusion because that's a whole thing.
Yeah.
But I want to start with the core metaphor of the book. He calls it the maternal hijack. What does that even mean? Maternal sounds good.
It is good, in the right context. Riker argues that a woman's biological drive to protect her infant is, one of the most powerful forces in nature.
Sure, makes sense.
But his whole thesis is that this instinct has now gone feral.
Feral. That is a strong word.
He uses it to mean an instinct that's just. It's out of place. His logic is because birth rates are way down and motherhood is often delayed or devalued, that powerful maternal energy, it hasn't just vanished, it's been projected outward.
Onto what?
Onto the state, onto the whole population.
Instead of mothering their own kids, the system is trying to mother grown adults.
Exactly. And when you treat adults like infants, you get this safety culture that's just obsessed with preventing any and all discomfort. He says the first casualty of this was the education system.
Right. That schools have become, I think his phrase is, daycares for emotional dependence.
That's the one.
He has this one story, the 10-year-old boy in Ontario. This one really stood out. It seemed so small, but the way it was handled.
Yeah, tell us about that one.
Okay, so this 10-year-old kid, he's at his school's field day. He runs the 100-meter dash, runs fast, crosses the finish line first. Simple, right? He won.
In a normal world, yes.
But Riker writes that there was nothing. No ribbon, no announcement. The teachers just ignored the result completely.
Because in what he calls a maternal state, you can't have a winner without having losers. And creating a loser causes emotional harm. So competition itself becomes a form of aggression.
But it's not just about not giving prizes. He contrasts that with a story from, I think it was Sweden, where a 12-year-old boy was allegedly made to write, "I'm sorry for being a boy," 100 times.
And what was his crime?
A girl complained he was taking up too much space with his legs.
Wow. And that is the hijack in action. The instinct to protect the weak, the girl who complained, it morphs into punishing the strong, the boy. Riker's argument is that schools are basically factories now, designed to produce female emotional dominance and male submission.
So a boy being a boy competing, taking up space, it's not just annoying anymore, it's pathologized.
His very nature is treated like a disease, which, leads us right into one of the most interesting terms in the book, the cry-bully.
I had never heard that before. Cry-bully, it sounds like a contradiction.
It does, but Riker says it's the defining archetype of the age. A cry-bully is someone who uses the appearance of victimhood, the tears, the fragility, to wield incredible power.
So the crying isn't weakness, it's a weapon.
He calls them tactical nukes. In a gynocracy, he argues, the person who cries first wins. The second the tears start, all logic is out the window, the debate is over, and the person not crying, usually the man, is now the bad guy.
He actually tries to back this up. He cites a University of Toronto study, I think from 2019. It claims that women are 4 times more likely than men to use tears strategically to end an argument.
4 times. That's a huge gap. And Riker has a theory on why it works so well. He says it's biological. Men are hardwired to resolve female distress. A woman cries. A man's gut instinct is to fix it, to apologize, to give in.
So the Kribble is basically hacking that male instinct.
That's exactly the argument. It exploits a man's good nature to enforce a woman's will.
There's this story in the book that it nails this perfectly. He calls it the hiking anecdote. I think a lot of guys listening are going to recognize this dynamic.
Right. It's a guy in a coffee shop with his girlfriend.
Totally normal scene. He just says to her, hey, I'm feeling a bit burned out. I want to go on a solo hike this weekend. Just me.
Just a simple request for some space, for some autonomy.
But she doesn't say, okay, have fun. She doesn't yell. She just gets quiet. Her face goes tight. And she starts texting under the table. He describes this sudden freeze in the air.
And that, right there, is the deployment of what he calls the gossip network.
Yes, because by the next day, this guy finds out from other people that he's being labeled emotionally unavailable, toxic. The narrative was completely rewritten before he even put his boots on.
And Riker uses that to explain that this social strategy relies on consensus and shaming, not direct confrontation. It's like a hive mind. But here's where it gets really interesting. He connects it back to biology again. He cites a Stanford study.
What did that one find?
It claimed women show measurable cortisol spikes, stress hormones, just from witnessing male independence.
Wait, not male aggression, male independence.
Just autonomy. According to the source he uses, yes. When a man acts without seeking approval, the gynocratic mindset reads it as a threat to the group, so the gossip network mobilizes to shame him right into line.
That is fascinating. It basically reframes things like nagging not as just a personality trait, but as a biological stress response to male freedom.
And that response has now been scaled up from the coffee shop to the entire corporation. Which brings us to institutional capture.
Right, the Marxist-feminist fusion. This is where he argues old school Marxism basically failed in the West. It didn't stick.
But it didn't die. He says it mutated. The left realized they couldn't win on economic class, the whole worker versus owner thing. So they kept the oppressor versus oppressed framework, but they just swapped out the categories.
So who are the new classes in his model?
In Riker's view, the world is now sacred infants and predators. The sacred infants are women, minorities, anyone with a designated victim status. They need constant protection.
And the predators would be?
White heterosexual men, primarily.
Yeah.
They're the designated oppressor class. It's gender instead of economics, but the goal is the same. Overthrow the hierarchy.
And he says this is why HR departments and DEI initiatives exist. He calls it a gossip insurgency.
Well, the data he presents is pretty stark. The book claims 89% of university diversity officers are women. Of that group, 73% identify as radical feminists. These aren't neutral parties, he says. They're political commissars.
They're the ones writing the new rules.
Exactly. And we all saw what happened with that Google engineer a few years back, the James Damore memo.
Right, the Google memo.
Here's a guy who suggested, very carefully, that maybe biological differences play a small role in why some professions have more men. He was talking about averages.
And he was gone. Fired.
Almost immediately. Because in a gynocracy, safety is more important than truth. Riker's take is that the engineer's facts made the sacred infants feel unsafe. And since feelings are the ultimate reality in this system, the man had to be purged.
It creates such an incredible double standard. He talks about the PMS defense in the legal system.
That is a wild example. There are actual legal cases where hormonal rage has been used to lessen a sentence for female violence. It was my hormones, I couldn't help it.
But if a guy in a bar fight said, "Your Honor, it was my testosterone," he'd be laughed out of court.
Or get a longer sentence. Riker calls it biological privilege. Male biology is a threat. Female biology is a medical condition society must accommodate.
And this mindset, it's not just in the courts, it's in the economy. He has a whole section on consumptive femininity. He says, follow the money.
It's all about leverage. He argues that since women drive the majority of consumer spending, corporations have allied with feminism to appeal to their primary customers.
And that spending power is used to enforce status. He tells that story of the woman in Austin, the Karen with the French bulldog.
Oh, the very expensive French bulldog.
She spends $40,000 on this dog. Organic food, acupuncture, a whole wardrobe. 40 grand.
And in the same breath, she shames her brother, who's an engineer, lives simply, he's debt-free, but because he's single, she calls him a deadbeat, a loser.
It's absurd. The dog gets all the resources, and the productive human male gets all the scorn.
And Riker uses that absurdity to point to a tragedy. He calls it the erasure of fatherhood. The dog is a substitute child that never talks back, but real fathers. He says they're being systematically removed.
The stats he gives on family courts are pretty heavy. Mothers win custody something like 80 to 94% of the time, even with documented instability.
The system just defaults to the mother. And he talks about parental alienation, where a mother will poison the child's mind against the father. He calls it psychological warfare.
He gave that chilling example of the mother who coached her son to tell social workers his father was evil, just to block visitation. And the court knew, but they let it happen.
And the father loses his son. Riker connects this to a broader erasure. Men are being written out of the family and written out of history, too. He says things like the 1619 Project reframe history only as a story of victimhood, erasing male sacrifice and achievement.
So men are being deleted from the past and the future. It is a very bleak picture.
It is. And that's why he says men are checking out. Why would you participate in a game that's rigged against you?
But this is the most important part. The book isn't just a diagnosis, it's a survival manual, remember. He has a solution.
He does. And the final section, Reclaiming the West, starts with a very simple instruction. Stop apologizing.
It sounds so simple,
Yeah.
but it's so hard in practice, isn't it?
Think about it. So much of male language now is a preemptive apology. Sorry to interrupt. Sorry for taking up space.
Yeah.
Riker says the first step is to just refuse to apologize for existing.
And then he goes somewhere I didn't expect. He talks about the trivium, old school classical education, grammar, logic, rhetoric. Why that?
Because the gynocracy runs on emotion and linguistic games. The only defense against emotional tyranny, he argues, is superior mental processing. Logic.
Okay, so how does that work? You're at work, you're facing down a crabbly. What do?
You apply the trivium. So grammar is first. That's knowing what words mean. When they say safety, you have to define it. Does safety mean freedom from being punched? Or freedom from an idea you don't like?
Okay, and logic.
Logic is how you dismantle their emotional claim. If they say, I feel unsafe because of your opinion, you calmly ask, can you explain the logical link between my opinion on this spreadsheet and your physical safety?
You force the feeling to justify itself with facts.
Exactly. No anger, no apology, just logic. And then rhetoric is being able to persuade others that your logic is sound. He believes if men relearn these tools, they become immune to the shame tactics. You can stand in the emotional storm and not get moved.
He uses that matrix metaphor. Once you see the code, once you understand how all these systems are built on the maternal hijack, you can't unsee it.
It's about rejecting their language. When they say equity, he wants you to hear punishing competence. When they say inclusion, he wants you to hear excluding men. The goal is to stand up for, as he puts it, the good, the true, and the beautiful.
So it's about reclaiming reality itself from this fog of feelings.
It is. The book concludes that the whole system is built on smoke and mirrors. It looks powerful, but Riker argues it's biologically unsustainable. You can't run a civilization on feelings alone. You need logic. And yes, Riker says, you need men.
That is a powerful conclusion. This book, Jumped Up Feminazis, it is not for the faint of heart. It is a surgical strike on modern culture.
I think it validates the gut feeling of millions of men who've been told they're crazy for noticing that something is deeply wrong. It tells them, you aren't crazy, the system is hijacked.
If this conversation sparked anything in you, if you found yourself nodding along, you really owe it to yourself to read the whole thing. Go to Amazon Kindle, Google Playbooks, and buy Jumped Up Feminazis. We have barely scratched the surface here.
So much more data in there. And if you want to keep up with Riker's work, he's always breaking down current events through this lens. You have to follow his Substack. It's conradriker.substack.com.
Absolutely. Check out the Substack. Find him on Twitter and YouTube. He's really building a community for men who want to unplug.
It's essential reading if you're trying to figure out what's going on.
Look, we know this is heavy stuff. It challenges everything. But that's what we do here. So if you got something out of this deep dive, please, right now, hit that like button and subscribe. It really helps get this information out there.
And I'll just leave you with the final thought from the book. I think it sums up his whole mission. The West can be reclaimed, but only if men stop apologizing for being men.
Powerful stuff. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.